It's so funny hearing the older samples, and at the time you're like, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And you hear it now and you're like,
It's having a love for music and all kinds of music.
I was doing this wall of sound. Yeah. So it was so overwhelming that there was no space for sound effects, let alone dialogue. And that's what,
I was signed initially as a songwriter and realized that I suck as a songwriter. I didn't have any interest in being a songwriter. I just liked the way music was put together. I always did arrangements when I was a kid. When I was in high school, they let me leave early to go write jazz arrangements for the local college. Really got heavily into orchestration and learning conducting. And in the first place I started really was Hanna-Barbera, which obviously is very old. So in the 90s, I'm sure Cris and I have had a lot of the same experiences in terms of it was only live musicians. Synthesizers were a euphemism for cheap. To be honest, as weird as this may sound, all of that experience informs all my mock-ups.
we both started around, maybe a little bit earlier than you, but anyway, he's absolutely right. When I moved out here in 1980, I started off doing student movies at UCLA. That was one of the ways to get in to the scene, is by working on student shorts. Thank the Lord that I went to UCLA. That was like the land of Oz, for me. But indeed, even if a student wanted original music for their shorts, they had to figure out a way to get some live musicians in the room. And that usually meant, during a break, lunch break, we'd give them free pizza, or they get paid a little bit. But the wonderful thing about that, of course, is that you had to work it out in your head, because there was no way to cheat and do mock-ups to see if what you were thinking was going to work. It was very nerve-wracking. The directors would come over and you'd sit and preview your music on the piano and talk about what it was going to sound like. And half of our job was trying to make sure that they walked away with an oral image, even though they were not musicians, of what it was going to sound like. Very nerve-wracking. I was a chain smoker back in those days, and I remember going in for the downbeat of any session. I was the only one this is before I had the money for orchestrators, the only person who really knew what it was going to sound like it was the composer. And it was like everyone's looking at him like, did we hire a nutcase, or what's it going to really sound like? And then you play the main, I always was a guy who said, I'm going to start with the main title. It's like, face the music. Either they like it or they don't.
If you don't like this, the rest is going to be a big disappointment.
It's going to be downhill. And so we'd put up the main title, and I'd hear it for the first time. They'd hear it for the first time, and it was always, my heart would be pounding like this before the downbeat. Was it going to sound like I thought it was going to sound like? And of course, you learn over time that certain things that you expected to work did work, but there were other things that you were counting on working that didn't. There was always that percentage. But the nice thing about it, there was still that small percentage of things that actually sound better than you thought they were going to sound. And that's how you learned how to orchestrate, not by pulling up samples at the computer.
So were you a piano player?
I was a very shitty piano player.
Okay, so I also went to UCLA and had similar, I guess, experiences doing student films.
Did you go through the regular program or the extension?
The regular.
Regular, okay, yeah. As a composition major.
Mm-hmm. I was a guitarist, and that was my main instrument. So if I would have directors come over, my piano skills were so bad that. So what did you do then? You said you were a shitty pianist. So I've humorously said, if someone was to walk in the door and put a gun in my hand and say, play fucking chopsticks without making a mistake, I'd say, pull the trigger. Let's get over it. Let's get over with it right now. I couldn't play chopsticks without making. So I
I could never play a cue from beginning to end in real time because, we would, before videos, all we had were breakdowns, and I would play it for them and say, and this is where this is happening, and this is where. Then we got videos, and I'd play the video, and I'd then play the piano. I'd always make mistakes, always. And they used to joke, I'd play 3 bars, and I'd go, oh shit! And swear, and we'd go, let's do it again. And I go, they watch me perform it in bits, and I was so. They knew, oh, when he's talking about the drums going, ba, 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 or whatever. And the strings, whatever. And they go, oh, I think he's got it in his head. And I think I can actually hear what he's trying to communicate. Even though he can't play the cue from beginning to end, I kind of hear the sounds because I use my mouth.
Right.
And then my greatest excitement was actually going on the scoring stage, turning to the director after they heard the main title, and I say, is this anything like you thought it was going to sound like? And if they said, Chris, this is exactly what I thought it was going to sound like, that was like, then I must have done something right.
That's wonderful. That
But
really
no,
is.
I didn't play, you didn't play guitar, my piano playing is, I'm an ex-drummer, I have it in my wrist, but not in my fingers.
Yeah. So I kind of came into scoring at kind of a weird time because it was post when everything gets recorded live.
Yeah.
And it was pre really good samples.
Right, of course.
And so I was in this like kind of hazy in between, and I couldn't, when I was at school, I couldn't afford a big keyboard or the EMU samplers or so I had Finale, and I would click in every single note with a mouse into the score.
Oh my God.
And then I would preview that for people, and that's just playing back with, I remember going to some computer store to get the new whatever Sound Blaster sound card that had more realistic orchestral instruments, and then you'd play it back, and your ear kind of, it's so funny hearing the older samples and the sound card stuff, the general MIDI. No, but at the time you're like, that sounds pretty good. And you hear it now and you're like,
That sounds like shit.
What was I thinking? Yeah. And who knows? I mean, we're now at a place where we think that what we're using now is pretty damn good, right? Yeah. 20 years from now, are we going to feel the same way? Probably not, right?
Yeah. When I finally got my, Giga sampler.
Yep.
Right after I graduated that, or maybe slightly before it, but that finally came out, and I was like, okay, I feel like more of a software guy than a hardware guy. But of course, then they had like the advanced orchestra, and you'd buy like a timpani disc, and you'd go to Guitar Center, and I was listening on the station there, and it's like, ooh, the timpani, like I got to save up for that.
Right. First series I had at Hanna-Barbera, I was broke. My car was repossessed. My equipment was stolen. I lived in Hollywood. I would rent a synclavier room. I spent more money renting the synclavier room, which was the Rolls Royce. Yeah. And the guy that I rented, I'm still in touch with this guy. He lost his house because he spent $700,000 on a synclavier, which sounds like shit compared to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And now it's like so accessible to everybody.
Right.
And it's so funny because it was very, very expensive, and now people are, I'll go on, I'm like looking up like, oh, what just came out, and I got to see it, and you see forums of probably hobbyists, but they're like, what, $500 for, like, dude, you're getting a whole like 70-piece string ensemble for that. Like
When I came out through conservatory as a classical guitarist, and basically was going to be a teacher. That was what they were training me for. I was like, well, this is stupid. But to get in, I had to go to a studio and do a demo. And
where'd you go to school?
University of Hartford, the Hart School of Music.
Oh, yeah, it's Hart School of Music.
Yeah, back at the time, it was great. For a conservatory, it was awesome. Yeah. But it was like, I'm not going to be a teacher, and I'm not John Williams, the guitarist. I'm not going to be that good. So I went to a studio, do a demo, and saw the guy behind turn the knobs. Like, well, what's that guy doing? So I dropped out and went to the school in Florida called Full Sail. And just like what you guys are talking about, they don't prepare you to be an assistant, which is what you're going to be when you're not going to be starting to mix records when you go out of school.
Right.
You're going to be an assistant. And they certainly did not teach me that at all. So I came out. Luckily, I got some really great internships. Went to Nashville. Spent 6 years there recording.
6 years.
Yeah, Nashville. And it was awesome because did all these amazing records with
really? Oh, wow.
Garth Brooks and Reuben McIntyre and all these people as an
Jesus.
assistant. But you're assisting all these amazing engineers, and these musicians are just out of this world. And that's kind of when I stopped playing guitar because they're just so amazing. I remember watching these two guitar players. One's John Jorgensen, another one's John Willis, and they did a twin guitar solo just by looking at each other, all in harmony.
Wow.
One take. I was like, wow, that's okay. I'm done. I'm gonna do this. I'm really happy. And but yeah, as far as assistants coming in and the longevity, when I was working with Hans Zimmer, we'd go through assistants all the time because they just couldn't keep up with the hours. Even to this day, I still do 100-hour weeks routinely. There's just so much work to be done.
I had like an intern from Berkeley last year, this kid. And I go, so what do you want to do for a living? He goes, well, I think I want to be an artist or a composer. And I'm thinking, what the fuck are you talking about? You can't just kind of be, right?
Right.
So he watched me work for like a couple of weeks and he goes, I'm going to be an artist. But the thing is, I go, have you ever, so what I told him to do, I said, I'll give you 2 exercises. Take a John Williams score and make it a lead sheet, and then take a Stevie Wonder song and make it a full score. Every note, I want to hear right down to the hi-hats. I want you to think 2 different ways than people normally think. Let's start there. Well, of course, he never finished those exercises. Right. And this guy's getting a degree, and he doesn't have any experience with live musicians. Right. He doesn't know what reality is, obviously. And I'm thinking, is that a step forward? Is that really what's helping people?
Well, even when I was in school, there was no reality check. It was like, okay, I know voice leading, I can write a fugue.
Yeah.
I can analyze a Bach chorale, but you left, and this is kind of when games were really taken off with big interactive scores and big Hollywood scores.
Yeah.
And I left school, and I was like the injured animal that wasn't ready to be released into the wild. It's like, well, who's going to feed me?
Right.
How do I?
Well, that's the whole thing.
Yeah, and I actually tried to go back to UCLA for a master's degree, only because I was too scared of the real world.
There you go.
And at the time, they really hated games back then. So I tried to get back in, and they told me, we know that you want to do music for video games, and we consider that low art.
They told you that?
And they said, take your degree and get out.
Seriously?
Yeah. And then it took me from that point.
That's a self-esteem builder.
6 or 7 years, because I had no idea, like, how do I take these skills that I have and turn it into a career?
Right.
It took about 7 years for me to land my first gig.
Oh my God.
Well, no university is known for trying to prepare their composers for a career in the real world.
I think maybe they kind of do now.
Oh, well, maybe that, really? Okay. Berkeley has always been the one to go to that is all about preparing you for a career in commercial music. Perhaps too much so, but I don't know. When I was at UCLA, there was no talk outside of my class, one class with Raxon, about applying what you're learning here into the world of film music.
Yeah. Well, the music school was here. The film school was all the way over here, and there was no communication at all. And so you've got these composers saying, I want to score a film. How do I find one? And these filmmakers going, I need music. How do I find a composer?
Oh,
Did you go over there and hang out?
Yeah, I would go hang out. Yeah. I put up flyers.
Yeah, sure. Same to me.
You know what we actually sell? Because you can't get a job without this, right? We sell trust and enthusiasm. If we can't get over on trust and enthusiasm, we don't get a gig. That's what they should be realistic in college and say, if you want to make a living, you got to look at it from a business standpoint and from actually even a personality standpoint of you got to be able to work with people and get them excited about your ideas. Mm-hmm. They don't say that.
You're talking about at universities?
Yeah, at school.
Well, most of the composers that are teaching composite at universities come from an academic background themselves, and they've never really, that's not something that they're comfortable with talking about, the world of making a living as a composer. That's why they teach.
What other world is there? It's then you're just teaching academics to be academics?
Right. I feel like they were setting you up to just get your doctorate, and then teach.
Oh, that's
And then
that's
you've
a-
got,
that's
you know,
what-
you write a concert piece once a year, maybe every
that's
other
not
year.
Right. That's not right. You
I
can't
mean,
make a living doing that.
No, and so for my final orchestration class, I was the only one in my composition class that wanted to do film music or game music or just big orchestral, something melodic.
Right?
And everybody else had these weird things going on.
Atonal,
and one of the
12
teachers was
tone.
like, he had just written a piece they had performed for ping pong balls, like a bucket of ping pong balls and watermelon, like someone smashed a
That's
watermelon.
useful.
There was one
Yeah.
of the percussionists, I remember this girl, like it was a big canister of ping pong balls and like tilted over onto the floor and like, oh, it's gonna create this really cool texture. And she did it at the wrong time. Nobody would know in a million years, but the professor, the composer, he like stop everything. This is just a rehearsal. He made her pick up every ball, put it back
in the can.
put it back in the can. But for my final orchestration thing, I did this big melodic orchestral suite, totally ripped off from Hellraiser.
Oh, see?
But it sounded great, and the orchestra, you know, gave me one of the
did they?
little
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the
for you.
the teachers were kind of
How
grudgingly
pedestrian, right?
like, well, sure, it sounded good, but it didn't break any new ground, and I was like,
Right.
I can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Stamina, more than anything, I think. Like you were saying with your intern, they don't quite have the grasp of what it takes to actually do the job. So stamina is one, wanting to do it, and not just saying, oh, I think I'd like to be a composer, or I think I'd like to be a score mixer and mix these big Hollywood films. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I really only just got started a few years ago, you know? So it's having a love for music and all kinds of music, for myself, because I do every genre there is. You know, when I was in LA, I was doing rap records. When I was in Nashville, I was doing country. In scoring, you're doing every kind of music there is as well. You know, there's a call for everything. So yeah, I think stamina is the biggest thing for me.
So stamina is one thing, but how have you figured out how to keep yourself from burning out?
I think for me, for doing it for so long, it was just the love of the job. Also, you know, I also got very unhealthy after 20 years of doing that, very unhealthy. So it's just a matter of eating right, getting exercise, all the kind of stuff you don't normally think about in this kind of environment, but it's so important to keep yourself healthy.
Sleep is huge.
Sleep is huge.
I know so many composers that that it almost feels like it's like bragging rights, like, oh, I only am able to sleep 3 hours a day because I'm so busy, and it's like, you are killing yourself.
Yeah, and I'm very guilty of that. You know, I was so proud to be the guy that did 36-hour days. That was like a feat of strength. I was like, that's great, but you just can't. It's not.
Yeah, and I
It's
find
not sustainable.
I'm way more creative if I take breaks.
Yeah,
and I've
absolutely.
kind of, after enough years, you sort of learn where, at least on the composing side, sometimes it's just not going to happen. You're just not in the right mood. You can't afford to have writer's block, but I'll say, you know, I'm not going to bang my head against the keyboard anymore. I'm gonna go watch a movie, or I'm gonna go for a walk, or I'm gonna go for a drive, or play a game, or something, or read a book. Just something to get away from it, and then your brain is constantly working on the anyways. So
That's a
that
fact.
kind of that sort of unfocused attention
Yeah.
is like half of my score.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Being typecasted, for sure. I'd be lying if I said that when I was a kid, I didn't have a natural fascination for Halloween and everything that leads up to Halloween, and wishing it could have gone on forever. It was always there. You know, I loved watching the Universal horror films, and monsters were my friends because I was a misfit. So, but never once when I started getting into writing music, or when I was dreaming, even behind the drum set, of becoming a musician, this, you know, celebrated superstar rock and roller, which is what I wanted to be when I was younger, that I think I was going to end up primarily being known for writing music that was intended to scare people. That just didn't seem, I didn't think God wanted me to be scaring people more than making them feel good about themselves and life in general. So, you know, what happened in my case, as I'm sure was in your case, is we love that music. And one thing can be said about horror films, scary pictures, is that as a composer, you're able to do stuff that you can't do anywhere else. And I just happen to love that whole experimental period in concert music that was happening, and fan of Stockhausen and Charles Ives and Stravinsky and Penderecki and all that stuff. I do love that. And so that's the language that seems to work the best for these kind of movies. So indeed, it so happened my first picture was a horror film when I was at UCLA. And then because they liked what I did, my next movie was for the same director, and he did a supernatural thriller. And then that got me the attention of Roger Corman, who was the king of B films. And the next film I did for them was a sci-fi rip-off film of Road Warriors, and then New World Pictures. And Hellraiser was really the one that really sort of firmly locked me into this genre.
Sealed your fate.
What's that?
It sealed your fate.
Kind of did in the worst and best of ways. Everyone here at the office knows half the time, at least there's one day when I walk in here with my head hanging down, going, I can't believe that on my fucking tombstone, it's going to be written the guy who wrote Hellraiser. Because I didn't really intend for that to be the case. Now, I've been blessed in that I've done, all types of films. The only kind of films I haven't really done I've never done an animated movie. I've done comedies. I've done a lot of action films, adventure films, romantic movies, romantic comedies, pretty much any suspense films, everything, but the ones that really define who you are, the ones that are the hits in the movie theater. And Hellraiser became a cult classic. And so, I've been sort of chased by that demon forever.
And I didn't start out wanting to do horror either, although I already said how I ripped off Chris's score for my orchestration class. But Hellraiser for me was, it was a turning point in my career. Like, that score spoke to me on so many levels and inspired me to be the composer I am today. But that Bram Stoker's Dracula was one of my favorites kind of coming up. And,
yeah, sure.
And I just kind of, there's something about, it's a pure natural reaction that you have to horror movies or anything dark or scary. That and I liked writing music that could invoke this pure reaction. And the other thing about horror music is that there's no limits to what you can do. So, in a romantic comedy, you're not going to have an atonal string section. But in a horror movie, you can have a beautiful melody. You pair anything with the right visuals, and it's scary. So, when I was a kid, I had, the little music box, and you put, that's such a cliche now, but you put a beautiful music box melody on top of something grotesque, and it's terrifying. You put children singing and laughing. Yeah. It's terrifying. Everything becomes terrifying. And I just like that the entire orchestral, electronic, world music, whatever palette is open to you.
And even sonically, you can do more things as well, just distortion on everything. And it's just like you're saying, it's limitless to the soundscapes you can make, and making everything really, really dry. Like in Joker, it's not a horror film, but it's probably one of the driest scores I've ever done, and you can make it just really in your face, having, there was a 100-piece orchestra on it, but no one can really tell that because it's so dry and they're playing so quietly. Most of my job in that film was just RXing out chair noises and everything else because it's so quiet but so intense, and it's just room tone. And I had the basses. I'd separate some of the basses out and just put it in mono, and it's just right in your face, and have it right here, and everything else is back here. And yeah, it's really fun to be able to do those kind of dramatic horror kind of films, and it's really, really fun.
Yeah,
you get way more creative.
You get way more creative.
Yeah,
yeah.
I met Daniel.
Thank you.
Bravo. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
I met Daniel a few years ago on a horror project for Resident Evil 7, the video game, and we were creating a bespoke library of string samples. And but another thing we also did, just going to like what you can do in horror that's not even considered music, but we also recorded things like there was a bee's nest just swarming with bees, and we had a guy go out with a binaural mic and record that. And so in my music, I've got the sound of bees, which you hear a swarm of bees behind you, and that's scary. Yeah. And then you mix that in with aleatoric strings, and you're like, they kind of sound like bees, maybe at the same time. It's just like, ugh.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because actually, there's a book that's coming out. What is the name of that book again? There's a book that's a companion piece to Blood on the Wax, and it was about horror soundtracks, vinyl horror soundtracks. And there's a sci-fi one coming out, and the authors of that called me and said, listen, we're going to be releasing a 45 with that. We'd love for you to go back to a score you did for this film called Invaders from Mars. And can you maybe put together something that represents that score? And that score was thrown out. Now, I've since played around with it for a release that happened years and years ago, but that was my first thrown out score. Now, why was it thrown out? It was thrown out because that was back pre-synth days, and basically I went out and did precisely what you're talking about, recording instruments and different sounds and then manipulating them by slowing them down. Music concrete score. Yeah. And it's like this wall of insane stuff, and there's not a single tune, and it's just masses of sound that are swirling around. Now, this stuff has become popular. What's the name of that movie I keep forgetting? The outer space movie that had that sort of sound design-y score that won the Oscar.
Gravity.
What's that?
Gravity. Stephen
Gravity.
Price.
Yeah, Gravity. Yeah. That's sort of a sound design-y score.
Very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is the kind of thing I was doing back in those days, but it was too weird and it got thrown out.
Real.
What's that?
All of his is sound design stuff. Stephen Price stuff is.
Yeah, but he went out and recorded machines, right? It's manipulated machine sounds.
Like music on
I used to have some machine. I used pile drivers and stuff like that.
Awesome.
And then I recorded went to Grand Central Station and recorded people.
Just the ambience.
That ambience you get of people during rush hour at Grand Central Station. Very cool. The wonderful big hall. And all these different sounds, and then waterfall sounds, and then manipulating them. And tape was back when you used to do the things with the tapes. Slow it down. It was borrowed from Eddie Kramer, Eddie Kramer, who was the recordist for Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Phasing. I did some of the phasing thing. The old real phasing.
Yeah, right.
That's cool.
So it was a weird one. And I was so thrilled to go back and listen to this stuff again after not having heard it for 30 years. But it's pretty weird. But it's sound. I used to love my big thing at the beginning, which goes back to Hellbound, and I was doing this wall of sound. Yeah. So it was so overwhelming that there was no space for sound effects, let alone dialogue. And that's and they didn't fly too well.
Yeah.
It didn't go over too well. As the sound design got better, so did the music fall to the wayside. So after getting that score for Invaders thrown out, I kind of cooled down and said, wait a second. They're not asking you to take care of the whole sound text. Yeah. They just want you to do the music, which has to sit behind the dialogue and, most importantly, the sound effects. So I started thinning things out a bit. Anyway, yes.
But that's invention.
What's that?
That's invention. What you were doing is straight up.
You were ahead of your time.
It's kind of fun.
It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great experience until it got thrown out and I was ready to shoot myself.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. I like to record live, obviously, whenever I can. We've done a number of scores together over the years now, me and Daniel, and I always give him my stems and I say, if you need them, here they are. But one one thing I've noticed over the years is sometimes these samples, they sound so good that your audio director or creative director, whoever, they get so used to that sound and it sounds huge. And then you go and you record and you're like, well, we could only afford a 40-piece orchestra. And they hear that and it's like, well, this sounds absolutely weak.
Right.
It doesn't sound like the sound at all. And for and you're like, well, yeah, that's what an orchestra sounds like. What you're hearing, I'm using a 6-horn patch and I'm playing chords with it. So in those situations, yeah, I'll have Daniel mix it together.
Right.
Yeah, it's changed the whole Hollywood's take on what an orchestra is good for and what it's not good for.
Yeah.
And what it's supposed to sound like. It actually sounds, it's like an orchestra on steroids or something. You know what I mean? They don't sound like that.
Yeah.
But also, of course, if you're planning to incorporate the synth sounds, orchestral sounds into your score to make it sound, like you said, like an orchestra on steroids, you start writing to what the samples are best capable of doing. And it changes your whole way of thinking. As we know, synths are most comfortable hanging around drones and static pads and simple chord progressions and am I right or wrong? Yeah. And so it's static. That's probably the most noticeable thing that's happened to instrumental writing, is if it's conceived at the computer, you're going to write to accommodate what the sample libraries do best. And what the sample libraries can't do is a lot of this fancy stuff. And so, and harmonically, you sort of are more inclined to want to hang around a pedal.
Yeah.
And
I didn't use a trumpet for years because there weren't any good trumpet samples.
Right.
And after a while, you do same thing in games. Nobody wanted woodwinds.
Oh,
for
woodwinds
years.
are out, trumpets are out. Yeah.
And so I lost this, a good third to quarter or quarter to third of the color of the orchestra, and now I'm putting winds in everything again.
Oh, you are? Okay, good.
I'm really
good.
trying to bring it back, at least in my own work.
Good.
But yeah, and I don't know when that happened. Like, no woodwinds, and people thought like, oh, it lightens it up, but it doesn't lighten things up at all.
Not at all. No.
It can
darkens
really thicken.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, depending on how you do it, and that's another thing too that I don't think a lot of samples teach people is orchestration, because you are learning. You're learning how to manipulate what sounds good on your computer.
Right, you're reacting to what you're hearing.
Things like, I've seen people do things like, oh, the French horns sound amazing down low and they're so loud and beefy, and you do that in real life and you're like, are they playing? Like, just little things like that.
Right.
And of course, you don't have to worry about this problem of when an instrument's actually being played by a human being, that they have to breathe. Mm-hmm. You can just put your finger down on a flute sample and just go on and 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 on.
Again, if you're not doing it yourself, that's why you need a really good orchestrator who can go in and be like, okay, you've got the trombone sustaining over 16 bars. We're gonna break that up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I use something that you guys most of society has forgotten about decades ago, a BC1. I'm still on a Yamaha KX88. You know what that is? It's like so fucking old. So I got a backup one because, it's like for parts. You know what I mean? Anyway, it has a plug, and I use a breath controller every day. So for all the wind instruments, I always use a breath controller because that's how they play. And so I use sample modeling. And I use all the other, I own all the Berlin stuff, and I own some Spitfire stuff. I got like everybody else, the LA scoring strings, the LA drama drums, I think I probably, Cinesamples stuff. But I really try to, when I play, give as much character and articulation to every single part, and I treat, as weird as this may sound, everything, I treat them like human beings.
Yeah.
And I think of them as human beings. And
Smart.
so even the woodwind section, as unpopular as this may be, exists. There are, I'm like playing every single part separately on a different sample, different player, brass. It takes for fucking ever to build, because it's like, are you kidding? You're gonna play all that? But you did a Star Wars gig, right?
Yeah,
So
I play the same thing. Every single instrument, I play it.
Okay,
even
well, see, there
even
you
if
go.
flute 1 and 2 and 3,
Right, it
even if
sounds
they're
better.
playing the same thing, I play them in.
It sounds better.
Yeah.
It sounds more realistic, and it keeps your head in the place of, these are people.
Yeah, and even if it's going to go live,
Yeah.
I like to put as much information in there as I can for the
Right.
orchestrator, and then let him or her take what I've done and see my intention, and then be like, okay, I know what he wants. This is going to sound a little bit better if we tweak this, if we adjust the voicing on this
But
chord
your
or whatever.
information is a lot clearer
Yeah.
than just,
I don't like to leave it to chance. Yeah.
you're like, I play chords. It's like, come on, don't do that.
I don't do key switches either. I've got everything on its
That's
own
what I
track.
have too. Yeah. It's old. I guess that's considered old school, but I think it's great, and it makes you break it down. So.
Gee, what can I not live without when I'm writing music?
I mean, you could just
Well,
say piano. I mean, right?
I would have to say, you've seen my room. It's like as crude can be. I'm still a guy who sits at a desk with paper and a piano, and I have to work it out in my head. Sketches are prepared, and the sketches go into that room. And if it's an orchestra thing, these guys read from the sketches and they input it, and then I go and listen to it and make comments. I'm not a programmer. I'm dependent on them to facilitate that which I already have in my head. And that dates back to my experience at
Right.
UCLA.
Right.
And Hellraiser, and having written that score, and Hellbound, and all the first 20 scores I did, I orchestrated myself. So I've got that sound in my head, and samples, I've never written a score at the computer. Now, if it's a synth, and when I'm using sounds that you can't notate in a traditional manner, yes, I'll go back there. My assistants will be they'll be my hands, but I'm sitting right by them, and we create the sounds together, and then I place them with their help. So I guess I need to have assistance when I'm doing synth scores, electronic scores. But I'm lucky in that most of the intended instrumentals, like legit traditional, I get that performed live anyway. So these are just temporary mock-ups. I very rarely fuse the two together if they're just doubling each other. If the synths are offering something that only synths can offer, then yes, I'll mix them in with the score. So I would say the assistants and the piano and some manuscript paper and a pencil sharpener.
Is that the same upright you've had forever?
No. This one right here is the one that Hellraiser was written on, I guess.
Wow, what a trip.
And the one that I used to use, because you can see actually over in the corner, I'm smoking cigarettes. It was all cigarette burns on me. So yeah, this is the one that I had back in the days when I moved out in 1980. And this is the one I used all the time. And then I slid over to that one. And so, yeah.
I don't even know what a thing I can't live without. I use Cubase. I have every sample library probably. So many that I'm looking into like a 70 terabyte solution now, storage solution, just because whatever new comes out, you gotta have it. If you want to keep up with the Joneses, you gotta have it. These things are huge, so it's like, well, what don't I use anymore? All the plange and stuff was the first to get booted, and that's freed up some space. But so yeah, but you can use whatever library. I could switch DAWs, I guess, if I had to. But my studio is really, since I spend the majority of my life in there, it's just one big room. It's got a big stand-up arcade, 4-player arcade. There's a tabletop arcade. Those are always turned on if I need to go play a quick game of Galaga or Pac-Man or something. But the walls are floor-to-ceiling original oil paintings, and you walk in and you feel like you're in a pretty scary museum. Monster sculptures everywhere. It's kind of the mini version of Guillermo del Toro's Bleak House, I guess. But I'm just very visual, and that inspires me. And so I guess that's why my music tends to be on the darker side. But yeah, I'll spend, before I go to work, I'll spend, some time just looking at one painting as if I was in a gallery, and just looking at the brush strokes and where the paint is built up, and yeah, that's probably, without that, I feel like I would be kind of a bit rudderless out there on the creative ocean.
Well, I think at the end of the day, because we all work in the world of making music for the moving image, that's really what we all need. We all need something that's providing a visual image in motion. Then our brains are fine. Take that away from us, and I'm afraid we're like a junkie needing a fix. That's what makes us special, is that it's the moving image. The moving image. I don't care what it is. As long as there's something moving, we can be sitting at the piano, nothing is going on in our heads. Show us a moving image. I don't care what it is. It can be commercial for dentures or whatever, and our heads are, all of a sudden, the music is boom, okay.
Well, when you're writing for games, a lot of times you don't even get to see anything.
Yeah,
you're writing while the game is being developed. And so, in a way, it's kind of like writing concert music, where you're just like music for music's sake. But what I was going to say is, even then, I'm going through scenes in my head, like, oh, it's a sci-fi thing. In my head, it's like, there goes the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
And I'm writing to the images in my head.
Do they give you like stills of what it's going to look like?
Yeah, I'll have that for sure.
Yeah, okay. So yes, I guess games is a different thing. I've gotten spoiled by the movie thing, where it's always images in motion.
For me, my biggest inspiration is having a big picture window, to be honest. I moved out of LA a couple of years ago.
Moved out of LA?
Yep, so I live in a little town called Taos, New Mexico.
It's a little Mexico?
New Mexico.
New Mexico?
New Mexico. You've
got to be kidding me.
No, I have a little ski town, 5,000 people. I live in this, it's just beautiful. There's mountains.
Did you retire?
I have not retired. I'm busier than ever.
And how do you pull that off?
It's everyone just sends me files.
Oh, they send you files?
Yeah, and that's what it's been like for 10 years. I mean, I've been mixing in LA for 20 years, but in the last 10 years, they just send me files. And
I don't want to sit in the mix room anyways.
Exactly. No one ever comes to the studio. Nobody ever came to the studio. They just wanted me to mix the stuff, send it back to them so they could listen in their home. Right. LA traffic, no one wants to go 2 miles and sit in an hour of traffic. That's awesome. I've been lucky enough to work on some really huge films, and that's kind of helped me with my getting my name out there. But yeah, just having a view.
Do you work with, have you worked with sort of any of the older gang, or are you pretty much...
I worked with Hans for a long time, Zimmer.
Right.
I did 6 years with him as well. But now it's a...
Does he still come to you?
No, I've kind of have my own thing. He's got Alan Meyerson, who does most of his projects, which is great. But no, I was working a lot with Johan Johansson. I work with Hildur from Joker and Sicario.
Right.
Chris, obviously, a lot. This guy named Hauschka, who's a German composer, and do a lot of stuff with him. And I have a lot of Japanese clients, and so a lot of my clients are worldwide.
I see.
So even if they're not LA clients, they're all over the world.
How did you make the connection with Johan? How did you make
the music editor at the time for the first Sicario. Actually, no, it was Prisoners was the first one. I did 3 films with him. He hooked us up, and he liked what I had done on some Hans Zimmer's stuff. And we did our first project together, and we had a really great relationship. And that was really amazing because he was so creative.
He was so creative.
So
yeah.
creative, and we'd be changing stuff in the mix constantly. He'd be, give me right back, I'll be right back, and he'll go and record a bunch of stuff and then come back with like 20 other tracks and say, okay, let's put this in there, like during the mix.
Wow.
Like, okay, the director's, because usually it's like, okay, the director and,
Signed off,
you
you're
guys,
done.
and you guys, you're like, okay, this is what it's supposed to sound like. Just make it a little bit wider, a little bit more 3D, do that kind of thing. But he's like, oh no, let's just put in, change everything, make it longer, make it shorter, put in another 20 cents. Wow. It's like, okay, cool. So that was really fun and really fast, but really fun. And he was just such a great guy. I really miss him. And then working with Hilda, who he worked with a lot.
Right.
And she did Joker. We did Sicario 2 together, and she's amazing. And yeah, I've just been very blessed to be able to pick and choose clients.
I see.
And I can work with who I want. And so that's a blessing. That's awesome. To be able to just work with your friends, basically.
Yeah. Right.
And it is. It's, I remember people growing up saying, oh, it's all who you know. That's how you get in the industry. And it's like, well, kind of, yes. That is part of the thing. People want to work with people they trust, people that you hang out with. You want to work with, especially in this industry, there's so much money involved and so little time. You have to be able to trust the people that you're working with. You're not going to go with somebody new and, you can try it for sure. And it may work, it may not. But I think when we were talking about earlier about, how to get in, it's get to know as many people as you can. Be nice to everybody. You just never know where you're going to see them coming up or coming down. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's a contact sport, I would say. This is a contact sport.
And like you said earlier, having a true passion for it, because it can be grueling, long hours, a lot of demands. You can't be precious about things because it's, at the end of the day, you're writing or mixing for somebody else. It's not yours anymore.
That's the other thing.
And if they
Absolutely.
want this and you think, well, might literally be the dumbest idea I've ever heard, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is not your project.
Exactly.
It's someone else's. You are there to facilitate their passion, their dream, their idea. Right. And you got to take your ego right out of the equation. I always say it's like you got to be a bit of a Buddhist about it, because once I give the score to the dub stage,
non-attachment.
Yeah, they have lots of stems. They can do whatever they want to do to it. So I have to just be like, and I don't go to a lot of the movies that I mix because it's like.
Do you go any of them?
Some, like I never saw Joker in the theater. I was very disappointed about it. That's the one downside about being in Taos, is I never got to see it like in Atmos. How it was like,
see.
And that was a disappointment. Maybe if it comes around, the 10-year anniversary or something, I don't know. But yeah, it's hard sometimes to go and go, well, okay, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I never go to see anything I've worked on unless there's a premiere.
Yeah.
But outside of that, never.
Yeah, exactly.
As Alfred Newman said so brilliantly, and this goes for mixing too, a film composer's immortality lasts from the scoring stage to the dubbing stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't go because I don't want to hear it, because if I hear what's been done to the music,
Yeah.
it's probably going to make me feel less excited about the next movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and so I live in this fantasy world where the last time I heard it was on the scoring stage with minimal sound effects, and the orchestra just was blasting away. That's the way I want to remember it.
Yeah, exactly.
Put it in the movie however you want to put it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to watch
just
it.
step away.
Well, there's always the soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always
Yeah.
a soundtrack.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you.
very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobo.
Awesome.